Hi, I'm Nervous, and welcome to another episode of The Nervous Breakdown. Today, I am taking some time to just mellow out and really simmer on my thoughts, and I hope that through speaking about this, I'm gonna feel a lot more centered on the script that I've been trying to write, because sometimes I'll have an idea for a script and then I just can't figure out how to tell the story, and I don't just want to ramble in a script. I feel like I've actually kind of done that before, and I don't appreciate the final project as much as I would like to. So today we're just going to talk about some things that I personally have fears about in modern Five Nights at Freddy's, and I'm going to be really chill about it.
You're a liar, and this is why Derek don't like you.
I have my window open to let in some fresh air, and that means that the car sounds are going to be louder and all that good stuff, but it's you and I on a ride today. You know, imagine we're on a long car trip that's going to be about an hour, and we need something to talk about, and you're just kind of like, hey, I usually get car sick. I just need you to kind of talk and kind of keep me distracted. That's what today's going to be. So I hope that those vibes are something you're interested in, because those are the vibes of today. That being said, before I start the video, I'm gonna do the thing where I ask you to like it and comment with your thoughts down below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to become a part of the Nervous system. So with that out of the way, let me go on a journey with you, and let me try to clear my mind of all of the doubt or uncertainty about the future, and really get into why I wanted to make the theory that should be coming out 2 weeks from now, as of you seeing this. So today's thoughts really started around the time we got the first teaser for the Secret of the Mimic trailer back in August of 2024. And at that time, I really thought, for some crazy reason, that game was going to be either about the puppet or Vanny's origins. Like, we were going to get more information about Vanessa finally. I really hyped myself up for those ideas, and so when it ended up being the Mimic, I was genuinely disappointed, and I hated feeling that way. I've said this in another Nervous Breakdown, but I'm not really into the Mimic, and I hated being upset about that, I hate being negative about the Mimic. I hate being negative about the new story. I'd like to just dive in and have a good time, but I am hung up because I got into Five Nights at Freddy's because of these very specific relationships between William and Henry and their children respectively, and all of those things, and grief, and how the web continued to be woven within that storyline. At least on the surface, it was like, brand new guy, doesn't seem to have any passion for animatronics. He seems kind of over the fact that he's even creating things that don't have a purpose. At the very least, that's the way I read the story, and I accept that that's not necessarily true for the games. The whole Tales books versus games controversy is a lot, and I do want to talk about it, but on the front, it's just like not liking the Mimic storyline. Maybe, and this is just kind of a side tangent that I just thought of, maybe that's why it's so much easier for me to just go, okay, fine, it's Tales games, because then I don't have to really sit here and muddle over it all anymore. I can just say what happens in the books is what happens in the games, and that's what it is, and we're moving forward. I don't know. That's just me psychoanalyzing my own behaviors. It would make me happy to find a connection to these newer stories where I had like a deeply personal connection to the original of William and Henry and all of those things, even Michael, and just like vying for a parent's acceptance, knowing it's not coming. And again, these are things we glean. These are not things that are expressly given to us. And there's no real full correct picture of the kind of relationship Michael and William had versus Michael and Elizabeth even. And did he even know Elizabeth? What was that even, we never see them all together. There's a lot of things about Five Nights at Freddy's that are left up to us to decide. Some people say that Crying Child was the golden child, and that's why William was sent into such a tizzy, because that was like the one kid that he, actually gave a crap about. Alternatively, other people have said that Elizabeth was the golden child because she was the one that he made this fun time baby for. I just had a deeply personal connection with the idea of just to not stray too far into the personal, just looking at this highly dysfunctional family and the way that every character is traumatized, the way that they, develop if they are given the opportunity to develop, and what grief does to different types of people. I really latched onto that as someone who has dealt with some very complicated grief in my life and know people who have dealt with complicated grief. It's just something that just so deeply resonates with me. What death is in Five Nights at Freddy's is also very strange, because people are possessing things, or is it their memories that are just hanging around and that person isn't really there, but we perceive it that way. It's kind of ambiguous, and I just appreciate all of the different ways that it allows us to move through the subject of loss and grief and death, and I just love all of that. And I think for a very long time that has been missing for me in The Mimic. I think that's interesting because Edwin's story is also a story of loss and grief and how he handled it. But the big hang-up, and I'm finally here at the point that I wanted to make, was modern FNAF seems to be explaining all of the quirky behaviors of the Mimic on its programming, on its AI, on its artificial intelligence aspects that are learning from behaviors of the people around it. So the Mimic, being a robot that was built to take care of a child and then mimicked the child post-mortem to the point that a man was so enraged that he beat this thing up and it learned the behavior of beating up, and then that's why it does that. It just, I follow it, certainly, and I don't think that it is bad, certainly. If you told me this as a horror film, I would be very likely on board with it. But within FNAF, I'm just sad. I don't know, sad's not the right word, but I'm just like, okay.
Huh? What? Oh. Okay.
And frankly, Edwin as a character, because he is so new, I didn't find myself hooked on his mystery, so to speak. It just didn't interest me the same way that reading The Silver Eyes made me feel very complicated feelings about Henry, right? And funnily enough, in a previous video, I purport Edwin to be a Henry type, a good father who's just a little caught up in his work and things like that. Now, having read The Mimic with the mindset of lore hunting or of just being analytic. But the problem is, these books are not something that, I feel like we should need to seek out to understand what's going on in the games. I find that misguided. I don't know. I like the stories. I want them to just be their own thing. But anyway, all that aside, Edwin is not a good dad. It almost seems like he doesn't even want a child. It's strange because he does want to do good by his son, but it doesn't seem like he has paternal instincts. And maybe that's Henry's deal too. But in so many ways, it he reminds me more of William, which is so odd. It's definitely, it's like he is a hybrid. Henry wasn't distant from Charlie. He loved her as a child, but she was taken so early, and then he obsessed over her and the loss of her and what in the world, what he could do without her, and all this other stuff. And then that's kind of how grief became like a cycle for him, like the not letting go and the not moving forward and the being stuck in this moment forever and creating a sentient robot just to abandon it. Now that part does kind of work with Edwin, but the road we took to get there is very different, because Edwin is just feeling burdened by his son. This is the way that I'm reading the text. I'm not saying this as a fact, it's just the way that I'm reading the text. Is Edwin seems burdened by having a son to care for, and is like, ugh, I have to do these things for my kid because otherwise he's gonna cry. Every time I go back to parallels rather than these things being a one-for-one, I love it so much because I can pick and pull pieces of it and go, oh, I see the connections that are here. But we keep getting more and more confirmation that Edwin really is just another character. And I find that part frustrating because I'm like, you are adding a new guy to do a combination of the things that William and Henry already did. You know, Henry in the Silver Eyes made the robot, you know, and then abandoned it. And obviously the results were different, but it's a thing. And William had like the whiny kid that he couldn't be bothered to take care of, right? And left in charge of Michael, who, you know, again, different, but similar. So you have like these distracted fathers, and so it's just another distracted father who has some level of like moral ambiguity. You can't quite tell in that time span if he's just always just down on his luck and he's just, oh gosh, and if the situation was different, he'd be a great dad, but because of this, and it's like, I don't know, it seems like you had the ability to make smarter choices in the beginning, but you put yourself in a situation where you kind of set yourself up for failure a little bit.
Drag her.
Then we also have the mom dying in childbirth with David, which drives me crazy because I don't see why we can't have a mom exist in this world. There's a part of me that I've talked about before where Scott wants to write what he knows, and he knows the experience of being a father. He knows the experience of being overworked. He knows the experience of potentially missing out on important childhood milestones because he is trying to make the money for the family and, you know, drowning in trying to create something. And I'm like, okay, I guess he doesn't know the experience of a mom, so he keeps writing them out of the stories very quickly. But I think he has access to a mother that might know a little something. So you can ask. I think you can glean some information from your life and your wife and her strife. Hello? Spitting bars over here. Like, put a mom in FNAF, Scott. A real one, not a robot. I read Help Wanted, okay? Put a mom in FNAF. This is my challenge. Steel Wool, if we're changing something about Secret of the Mimic and all that stuff, if we're changing something, give David a mom. For 2 seconds, give him a mom. Dying in childbirth? Embarrassing. Okay, I'm getting heated. So we'll recenter. All that to say, my big gripes with modern FNAF, and I've talked about this in ways before, is just that I'm not a fan of the artificial intelligence being the driving force, and I don't think Edwin is a necessary character. And a video that I've thought about making but haven't put the time into yet, you know, it just kind of floats around up here, is kind of saying, okay, if I were going to do modern FNAF, if I were going to start at Help Wanted and work my way through, what would I have done differently to better implement the Mimic as a character, to better, I mean, even if, would Edwin in the books just be sort of a placeholder for Henry and William and their strife, or would I actually make that a character, or would I make a different character that could actually bring a little something new to the table, blah, blah, blah. What would I do going from Help Wanted to Secret of the Mimic? What would I do? And I haven't pulled the trigger on that video because I do think a lot of different ways about it. And because of the thoughts that I've been having more recently, where having Edwin as a part of the story doesn't have to necessarily be a negative. Now, I will still I will still always say that I do believe that he's unnecessarily similar to William and Henry. I don't believe that if you're going to introduce a new character to Five Nights at Freddy's, that you're really doing much with Edwin.
Drag her.
Now, Steel Wool is not really, probably very likely not responsible for Edwin, right? Like, very likely that's another Scott Cawthon character. It sounds like it.
Drag her, girl. Drag her like she didn't do that to him.
But I'm not in charge of what Steel Wool is doing and what Scott Cawthon is doing, right? They're doing their own thing. And for a while, that was me with Modern FNAF, was going back and forth between like, well, these aren't bad ideas, I just don't like them, but is this really necessary? Because we already had these characters and blah, 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 blah. Going back and forth. And I finally reached the root of what bothered me. And it was this realization that, or understanding that Steel Wool, Scott Cawthon, whomever, the story team overall has introduced the idea that the games we've played, FNAF 1 through 6, are games in the world of modern FNAF. And the events in them may be more close to accurate or not close to accurate, which leaves room for Fazbear Entertainment, who's now this more mysterious entity than they were before, to muddy the waters indefinitely in a number of ways on what has happened and what hasn't happened. Are William and Henry real? Is it just Edwin and Fazbear Entertainment? Were kids ever really possessing these animatronics? Was that all a big ruse? And that sent me down this horrible rabbit hole. I'll say horrible, but maybe it's not. I don't know. We're playing Secret of the Mimic, where presumably Fazbear Entertainment is coming into the factory to retrieve this technology that's been made for them. Assuming I'm wrong about the fact that the game doesn't actually take place in 1979, assuming it really does take place in 1979, and I'm just really behind on how long Fazbear Entertainment has been a thing, and I can be, whatever, I can be wrong, I don't terribly mind that. I at the time, when I said all that, I was just like, you know what? If it's in 1979 and Fazbear Entertainment was a thing before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza wasn't even a thing, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm not going to theorize about FNAF anymore. I've calmed down.
Okay. Are you kidding? That's unfair. She made those. I need to calm down.
Nothing is actually the end of the world in this, whatever. I've made peace with the fact that it just may very well be the case. And if it is, and if this is in 1979 and they're going here to collect the Mimic, and then they use that technology on the original animatronics, and the only reason that kids are dying is because of this Mimic technology that is all AI, and they just, and it's like, and all of this serial killer and all this stuff, it wasn't real, because what in FNAF 1 do they find the killer in, or do they see the killer in on the cameras? In a ding-dang Freddy's costume. Whether that's Bonnie or Freddy, it doesn't matter. In a costume, the same way the Mimic likes to get into costumes. Oh my gosh. And that's me. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's donning the costumes. He's kidnapping the kids for whatever reason. He's just killing them and stuffing them into animatronics because that's what they programmed him to do. I don't know. You know what I mean? And he's just a broken piece of machinery. And it could go a number of ways. It could just be like, there's just this one, and then they keep locking him in the back room and he finds a way out. I don't know, whatever. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall here, but like, do you feel what I'm saying? Like, where I'm like, oh, they could be rewriting everything so that really the whole time it wasn't a serial killer. It was their technology. And they covered it up with this fall guy of William Afton to cover themselves legally. And continue to, because people wouldn't trust the attractions. If it's a guy, you can get rid of the guy. If it's your tech, it could destroy their company a lot more to know that like they were using bad technology than to think that like, oh, just some guy came in and did this horrible thing and then we got rid of the guy and everything's good to go. And that entire thought process was really, really stressing me out. And I was going to make, that's the scripted video I was going to make, was this is what I'm afraid is going to happen. Here is how I would lay out the world where the mimic is actually responsible for all of the rumors. And everything else that branches off of that can either be an extension of the program going haywire or completely made up to continue the rumor that it was just this guy. And then they made him like a Michael Myers kind of invincible thing that you could set on fire and he still comes back and like make it into this horror story kind of thing. I just was like, oh, I know that this is possible. And that really, that just sent me, you know what I mean? Just retconning so much information that we've had for so long in so many ways that we thought that this all worked out. So that was my panic, right? And so I started writing that script. And it was through writing that I had an epiphany of sorts. And that's the epiphany came from things that I've thought about before that I really do want to talk about because they are thoughts that I had on my own, but I am aware of another theorist named Mamakato who is doing a theory about the like exact thing that I want to talk about. Update, that video by Mamakato is out now. You can watch that theory here if you want to watch it to kind of understand where I'm kind of going with this. I'll still just kind of move past the thoughts in the video just because obviously you're gonna get them soon anyway. So, but I just wanted to let you know that it is out, Mamakato's video. You should watch it. That's that. Okay, I'm rambling. Let's go move back into the original video. I'll just say this, that there is obviously in the story of the mimic, and again, Tales games, what you do and don't take from the books is up in the air. There is the quote-unquote elephant in the room, I don't know, that thing we have to address, right? Of Edwin's beatdown of the mimic being an infusion of agony. An infusion of those deep, dark emotions that if it does exist in the game's world, which I, for a lot of reasons, have a hard time believing that it doesn't. Like, this force seems to exist in the game world. And you know that what I think, because I believe that Remnant is definitely a force being utilized within the Pizzaplex. So for me, it's like, it's all kind of intertwined. I don't think that it's impossible for, in some way, shape, or form, and I'll just be vague about that, for the mimic to be possessed metal of some kind. From that vantage point, a lot of things started to click. And I said, oh, there's a way for this to all interlock, intertwine, and be good. And at that junction, my only hang-up will be Edwin's existence. We've talked about I feel like this is something I've said publicly enough that I can say this, but people have commented like, oh, if only Edwin's middle name is Murray, Murray. If only Edwin's middle name is Henry, if we get into Secret of the Mimic and its full name is Edwin Henry Murray, what a joy that would be. And you can disagree with me, you can disagree with all of us, and it would retcon Charlie, theoretically, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it would, but, it could retcon Charlie, it could not. It's dependent entirely on a number of factors, the major one being how close to the games the books are. Because in the books, we know Edwin disappears for 30 or 40 years and doesn't come back until he's on the board, which would make a lot of what we seem to understand about Henry. The inclusion of Charlie and all of that would be really complicated. So at the very least, like, Charlie's story would have to be vastly different in the games from like what we think it is, because definitely in FNAF 6 it's made fairly clear that Charlotte is Henry's child, and she did possess the puppet and all that good stuff. So, you know, it would be an interesting thing, but it would retcon other things, and I don't know exactly how much I would actually love it at the end of the day. But when I think about it, I'm like, oh, it would just be nice if Edwin was Henry and we didn't have 3 guys who are so unnecessarily similar. But you know what? It is what it is. It's not my story. You know what I mean? So it is what it is, and I just am excited about being able to talk about the idea that, you know, the Mimic's story could actually, because one thing that I feel like we've all kind of talked about before is just like, okay, so there was this animatronic that had these abilities that just lay dormant for decades in this factory, and how ridiculous and blah blah blah. It's just like, ugh, we're just shoehorning in something. And that's the big thing where I had about 1979, where I'm just like, oh, it's so frustrating how far back this is. Now, if the game does genuinely take place in 1979, I think that will put a wrench in Tales games. Am I right? It's very strange how I can make a video and be like so confident and then continue to think on it and change my mind. I really honestly like it. And I want to say this before I say something else. I saw a comment on that Secret of the Mimic, you're wrong about the Secret of the Mimic video, saying like, I always saw it as more of like an adaptation. I think that's, and I was like, kind of going, okay, see, an adaptation is what I always thought we were doing when it came out that Tales games was like the thing. And now I accept that when I'm talking in my videos, I'm saying like 1-to-1 canon, and then it's like confusing. And I was even saying in that Tales games confirmed video from weeks and weeks ago that I was like, I think like all of the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories happen. That was like a vast leap for me to make, and I'm making it without all of the information, frankly, but I was just like, whatever. Like, I was like, whatever. And I think that, like I said, maybe at the beginning of this video, it would just be easier for me to go in that direction, because I don't understand why it can't just be meaningfully different from the books. If they had just made the plush thing, the tiger, something else, we could be done with this. And it's just like, okay, it's an adaptation. It's not 1-to-1. There's going to be things that are different. Boom. There we go. But the fact that they are doing so many silly things that, frankly, do not need to be the same for the rest of things to kind of fall into place in a similar but different fashion, it's been frustrating to me that it's like, okay, if you're adapting the books into the games, but you are going to change meaningful details, then just pick one thing that's aesthetic and strong and flip it. Make the tiger something else. I don't think that's crazy. There are a number of things you could look to from Pizzeria Simulator, in my opinion, specifically, like that you could go, okay, this is what that's gonna be, you know, or just, I don't care, just make it something else. You know what I mean? Make it one of the mediocre melodies or something, you know, like do that and give us that and make it clear that something's different so that we can move forward without this still silly debate. It's silly to me because I'm just like, so for me, the idea of Tales games was always Steel Wool is reading the books, taking the information from the books, has the story from the books. Scott Cawthon gave the same story to the people writing these books, to the people at Steel Wool Studios. And they're both creating the same story with elements that are different to make it more correct for a video game versus a story. Because you know, like a movie adaptation, you're going to change certain plot lines exactly where they fall because it's going to play better in a theater than it would in a book. Stopping in just to say quickly that someone left a comment on one of my community posts that I think really succinctly sums up what I think about Tales games, what I had initially believed Tales games to be, and things just kind of got snowballed and telephoned or whatever in some kind of a way that ultimately led to me being confused, and also I think the community being at odds with each other, because I think that things have just metamorphosized and I don't even know if that's a real word, but into something that I mean, we've lost the plot a little bit, I guess. I don't know. But ultimately, I think that this sums it up. So I'll say it and then I'll expound upon briefly. But Jack Donaldson, thank you so much for leaving this comment and for not being upset with me using it in the video. I did comment and you seemed okay with it. So, but I think Scott laid out ideas in Tales. So the Tales stories are close to the games, but Scott still wants to be able to tweak things here and there. And that's like, I've said it in a lot of words. This really sums it up very, very briefly and has kind of clicked my brain into going, that is what, to me, Tales games is. And that is, of course, I talk about in the video more of my thoughts on that. But ultimately, summing it up, Tales is the blueprint. And I think that opens the door. It's the blueprint. It's not necessarily exactly how things ended up, but it's Scott's blueprint. This was his initial, these are his thoughts. This is the story that he wants to tell, and then Steel Wool's job is to adapt that into the games. I think that avenue really opens up the door for us to be able to still use the books as evidence points and say, look, there are these things in here, and I think this is what's going on, and not be treated the same way as somebody using Silver Eyes as evidence, because I understand there's a difference. And again, I talk about that I've already talked about that, so I won't go into that here, but Tales being the blueprint, I think makes a lot of sense, because then it's okay for us to use this book to theorize and point to things, but it doesn't have to match one-to-one for that evidence to be valid. It doesn't have to match one-to-one for that evidence to be valid. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's important, and I think we should, ruminate on that. Just let that simmer. Just see how it feels. I just wanted to say that. So thank you again so much, Jack Donaldson. And thank you to everybody who's left comments saying things like Tales adaptations and things like that. Of course, we're talking about that in the video, but I really just needed to click that in, because that really felt good to me, the way that they said that and what it made me think about the blueprint of it all. Okay, and with that all being said, let's get back into the original recording again. We need a word for what it is. Because saying Tales isn't canon, my hang up, okay, and this is what I've said before, is what do you not think happened then? That is my new kind of what are we talking about then? Because to me, Tales games is saying Edwin Murray was this guy and he invented the mimic and then he disappeared and his son died, and because his son died, and all this other stuff, and he came back later and realized what was going on and kind of jump-started the idea of trying to stop it once more. Little things being different, like the lace factory, is not the same level of veering off that Silver Eyes did from the games. And I've said this, and it's just and other people have been yeah, it's way closer to it than that. And I'm that's really I guess what I'm looking for. When we talk about Silver Eyes, there's a lot of things that are thrown completely off the table because the story is so fundamentally different. Motivations may be the same or similar. The relationship between, say, William and Elizabeth / baby become kind of well-rounded, I suppose. You can look at and you go, well, she does kind of do the same thing in Pizzeria Simulator where she's on her dad's side again or whatever as Scrap Baby. You can look at these things and go, okay, I see a through line, I see things, but we don't believe Henry made sentient robots. We just don't believe that, because there's nothing like that in the games. Tales is a different beast, because beat for beat, things are lining up. I need to remove the one-to-one from my vocabulary. I hear what people are saying, and I'm I guess I hear you. I'm trying to, or I'm not even, it's not even that I'm trying to, it's I am moving in the direction of why can't we just use this as a blueprint? And I think for me, it doesn't need to be all of the stories, and I understand that. But I don't like how specific GGY is and how specific we take GGY, but we don't apply that same specific kind of, oh, this is what happened to the other games or to the other stories. Generally, people in the comments are fine, and I'm not saying like you got to change who you are or anything like that, but people in the comments were like, I just don't understand why it has to be one or the other. I'm saying stop saying that what we have isn't evidence. That's what I'm trying to say, is like, you have to be able to look at the fact that Edwin Murray is name dropped, that Tiger Rock is in the game, the suit version is there, and it's happened, and we have it, and it's clear as day. At that point, it feels strange to go, well, that's all that means. It doesn't mean anything else. I think we can glean just a smidgen if we're saying that GGY is the same person, that Edwin Murray is also the same person who also made the mimic, and very likely just say he had a kid named David who ran into the street chasing a ball and died. Like, I don't know what the hang up is on accepting these things as going like, we can probably theorize from the vantage point that David is also real and David was hit by a car and David died. Does that make sense? I feel that's where I'm at. I'm like, okay, Tales games as a very specific set of events, fine, we can throw it out. So we need like a name for this other thing that's not Tales games and that's not Tales fiction. And I think Tales adaptation is great, but it might be too long. But Tales adaptation is what I'm comfortable moving forward with. Tales adaptation seems totally fair to me, totally right to me, and I think that being in denial about that is the thing that's striking me as odd. Not thinking that every single book happened, not thinking that every single story happened, not thinking that every single little detail matches. I think that's valid. I don't think there's a reason for me to split hairs with people over that. I just think that maybe we're at the point where the name has to change, or there needs to be this other thing that's not even middle ground. Like, it's just kind of scooching over Tales games a little bit to be like, it's happening, they're going to change some things because it's probably like not a good idea to make a game about walking around an abandoned lace factory. Potentially. It's more about like the aesthetics and gameplay opportunities that won't exist if all of the details line up. Tales parallels, that's not the same, right? Because parallels would be like Edwin is a stand-in for something that isn't in the games. Or for something that's in the games, and Edwin isn't, but Edwin is. So that's not a parallel. I like, at this point, my knowledge of like literary terminology is tripping me up. But I think that calling it Tales adaptation until we can come up with something flashier is gonna alleviate a lot of the animosity that finds its way into people's comment sections. And I ask for your thoughts and opinions. So I'm not saying like, oh, I asked for it and I can't handle it. I think it's just the vibes. Like, maybe it's my responsibility to read something that someone says with a level of emotional charge to it and, you know, be a neutral person in response. It's not really how I roll. I am a sassy gal. But yeah, I wanted to say all that to say, like, if you've been here since before and you know how active in the comments and how quick to reply about things I used to be, if you notice the step back, it is not because like other people have just gotten so mean that I just can't stand it. And it isn't that I don't care or think I'm too like big to care about like what other people are saying about my theories. I need to hear it. I need to hear feedback, at least in some capacity. Or I don't know, like what? I just keep like saying stuff that's potentially not true. I don't know. I mean, I say I need to hear. Maybe I don't. I don't know. Maybe it's clouding my judgment. I don't know. So I think I'm understanding that it's a little like not very fruitful for me to do that. So sometimes I may be screenshotting your comments and not actually replying to them, but observing them and soaking them in and trying to use the information to the best of my ability. I'm gonna try really hard to get back into just vibing. And that may change the way people view me as a YouTuber, but I need to get back into vibing with what I'm doing. And I, like, before you guys go to the comments and talk about like, oh, you do whatever you, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please don't do that. Like, I like, even if it hurts my engagement, like, I'm not saying that like my mental health is wrecked. I'm not saying that I'm like having a moral dilemma. It is not that serious. I'm just like, in a casual sense, assessing my work and what I want to do and how I want to do it. And I'm just saying that, you know? So it's not like, don't let the comments get to you, make whatever, like, that's what I'm just making whatever I want. Is at the end of the day, is what we're doing. I just like kind of got into a mindset for a minute that the things that I say might sway somebody, and I need to be careful about what I say because of that. When I say these things to you, I say them from the other side of the war, so to speak. I've already done the work and I already get it, and I'm like, yeah, this doesn't really matter. So, okay, moving on. And so I'm just letting you know what my goals are just to go back to watching Five Nights at Freddy's videos with my brain turned off. And that is something that I learned in film school, that you stop enjoying movies as much when you start looking at them as a filmmaker. Not that I would call myself a filmmaker, but I do have a degree. But you know, it was just like, I had a professor be like, when I go to see a movie, I turn my brain off and just go to have fun. And that's what I need to start doing again. And it's really hard, again, to make FNAF videos without your brain on. You turn your brain off, you start saying silly stuff. You start getting your wires crossed because there's a lot of wires. Very easy to cross. But yeah, I think that's all. That's all. And I'll end today with just pulling it all back around to say, I hope that I can write this script. I think a little freer. And with that, I'll start to wrap. And how I'll close out today is just saying I'm talking about like the comments and all that stuff because I know that this theory goes against what I like just said in the you're wrong about Secret of the Mimic thing. It's like I'm wrong about Secret of the Mimic, because I in that video was talking about Tales games being canon, and in this realm I'm talking about Tales adaptation very specifically, and in that video I talked about there's no way that this game is set in 1979, and this is saying like, hey, like if Tales is not exactly the same, this game could happen in 1979, and then if it is, then this is what I think is going to happen. But the fact that I'm going against that makes me think like, oh, like I'm just saying whatever I want whenever I want, and I don't actually have any like strong convictions and blah blah blah. And I need to let go of that because this is Five Nights at Freddy's, and I don't actually think it matters if I don't have strong convictions. And in this theory, I'm saying it like this, and in that theory, I'm saying it like that. Because I'm looking at the story from all avenues, which is theoretically what the people want you to do, is go like, well, but what if this and what if this, to really try to nail down what actually is going to happen. I can put out 5 different theories, and 4 of them can be wrong. If one of them's right, that's fine by me. All 5 of them can be wrong, and that's fine by me. I'm not trying to get one over on the people making these games and like ruin the surprise. I just like thinking about it. And so when I think about it long enough that I have a long enough script to speak about in front of the camera, that's what I'm doing. And I hope that we can all be more comfortable with that stuff, because I feel like I do a whole lot of disclaimers in my videos that I'm just really tired of. And I think it's just like, I just want to vibe out, man. And if I'm wrong, and if people in the comments are like, yeah, this is wrong, I just want to be able to go, okay, I guess it is, but it was fun. It was sure fun to think about, and it was sure fun to write about, and it was sure fun to make. So, that is what it is. And with that, I appreciate you all being here. I hope this felt like a good car ride. If you had a real car ride that you were going on while you were listening to this, have you made it to your destination? Is it somewhere you want to be? Is it somewhere you're hoping to leave quickly? Because no matter what, I hope at the end you find yourself at home or somewhere nice and you can just go, you know what? Today was all right. And if you had a bad day, I hope that this was a light in it and not a dark part of it. And I hope that you find some small respite in a nice meal or a good treat or a good show or comfy blanket, because that's what I want to do. And I'll send you off into whatever time it is, wherever you are right now, with good feelings. With good feelings. Feelings I hope reach you. Yeah. And you know, if you liked the video, I'd love it if you'd drop a like. If you have any further thoughts, I'd love it if you'd leave them in the comments. And if you haven't already, I'd love it if you would subscribe and become a part of the nervous system. I'm currently uploading videos every other week, and I go live on Wednesdays and Fridays. But if you can't wait, there are videos on the screen right now just for you. Okay, bye.